Hi everyone. The following is an interview with J. Allan Cross. He is a practicing witch of Mexican, Native American, and European descent whose craft was shaped by his Catholic upbringing and mixed family culture. Living in his home state of Oregon, he works as a psychic medium and occult specialist for a well-known paranormal investigation team out of the Portland metro area. When he's not investigating, he enjoys providing spells and potions to his local community, exploring haunted and abandoned places, working as a consultant for other workers and investigators, and, of course, writing about witchcraft. The link to his official Instagram page will be linked below, as well as the Amazon links to two of his books that we will be discussing on this show. So, with that, please enjoy.
Hello,
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It is wonderful to see you, and thank you for all of your patience with me.
Oh, no, of course. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've rescheduled this because last time I had the head cold from hell, which I am
Mm.
recovering from. So if I sound a little raspy, that's why,
No, of course, that's totally understandable. These things just, happen so suddenly.
for sure.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're doing better now. I wish you a full recovery as soon as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. My acupuncturist did a lot of weird stuff to me yesterday, so I should be
Mm.
healed any moment now.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess maybe we could start with you telling the viewers more about yourself. And maybe I guess I should start by saying that I read your book. I actually have it here, one of your books. I'm looking forward to reading the American Brujeria as well. But this book here, the reason why I like it so much is I think it's the most comprehensive and also a very fun to read guide to the paranormal. And I especially like the way you broke down all the types of different spiritual entities that one may encounter during a haunting. Um, I really like watching paranormal investigation videos. Sam and Colby, you're probably familiar with their work and some other similar channels. And every time I watch them, I think back on your definitions, trying to guess what kind of entity they're dealing with, or sometimes there's like multiple different types of entities. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Mm.
And yeah, I guess now you could tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Definitely. Well, I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. A lot of people are often surprised when I tell them that The Witch's Guide to the Paranormal is actually my favorite of the two books that I've written.
Mm,
It's probably the one that's gotten the least press or least response because it's such a niche topic. Um, but I have been doing paranormal investigation since I was 15 or 16. My mom dropped me off at my first case. And the way that it kind of worked was my mom had been working as an animal communicator or as a pet
mm,
psychic in my hometown. And I can do some of that, but a great deal of mine is very much geared towards spirits and the other side. I'm what we refer to as a post-cognitive psychic medium. So I see mostly the past and also communicate with those who have crossed over. And that's a really great one-two punch for paranormal investigation. So my mother was doing animal communication, and people would come to her and go, "Oh, hey, you're psychic. You know, psychic is psychic. My house is haunted. Can you come and fix it?" And she's like, "No." But my kid can. And I'm like, "Hey." So I started on my own very early and continued to be a solo investigator. And for me, the point always was to try and fix the haunting or help in some way.
mm,
I didn't realize that there was another option until I joined a paranormal team later. So I had been doing it for about 8 years by myself. and then joined a paranormal investigation team. And luckily, they were also very specifically focused on what we refer to as resolution. We try and stay away from terms like cleansing, stuff like that, because it's we all use the vocabulary that works for us, but for us personally, we kind of like the idea of resolving a haunting. Because sometimes it's less about, cleaning the spirits out, and it's more like, okay, we need to work on a system that will work for everybody, depending on what's going on. Um, but they were very much focused on that too. And so again, it kind of reinforced this idea that like, okay, this is what paranormal investigators do until I started to sort of get a name on the internet, and then people from different countries, different side of the country that I'm in, would contact me and go, "Hey, I'm having this type of paranormal activity. Can you help me?" And I'm like, "Well, I can't really get to Minnesota, but let me find your local paranormal investigation team." And so I'd bring them up and I'd contact them and be like, "Hey, I have this person here who's experiencing this kind of activity. Can you go and fix it?" And 9 times out of 10, if they responded at all, the response was usually, "We can't do anything to help, but we would love to come and take some pictures." And I'm like, "No, did you not hear the part about this family is all sleeping in the living room together because they're terrified? Like this is they need more than somebody to go on safari in their home." And so that's when I began to realize that this information was not ubiquitous. And as that understanding grew, um, in some ways it made me kind of furious about the injustice of it. So I kind of wrote this book uh, out of angst in some ways. But also I did see a need. So um, and of course, growing up, I was also at the same time growing into my psychic ability, into my magical practice as well. And so for me, they always went together. And I didn't realize again until this book came out that that is not the case for most people. Witches and paranormal investigators are in decidedly different camps, and they do not like to commingle, which I did not realize again until this book came out. And I was like, wow, y'all need to work some of your stuff out.
Oh yeah. That's an interesting point because like my other book that I very like that I'm like practicing right now is this one. I don't know if you've read it. Um, Psychic Witch by Matt Elrin. I hope I pronounce his last name correctly. But yeah, it's another thing about like psychic abilities and witchcraft, which I was also surprised when I was reading the introduction in that book. He was also talking about how people don't really connect psychic abilities and witchcraft. And I was surprised to hear that too, because I thought they're, well, he described them as two sides of the same coin, and I thought that that was kind of obvious, but
Mhm.
apparently it's not.
For sure. It was a hard thing for me to kind of come up against when this came out because I'm going to make some people angry, but it kind of illuminated something unfortunate in the witchcraft community, which is this fact that witches and people in the witchcraft community, they do like the psychic skills part. And a lot of time they do utilize it, but usually it's for strictly personal means. They like to know things. But as soon as it's time to then like bring it out into the world or go and do something to help another person, then they're not so excited about it. If there's not like a prestige portion of it attached.
Mm,
Usually it's like I will do a lot of witchcraft stuff tends to be like, well, I'll do my own thing for, myself or for my own circle sort of a thing. But as soon as you're like, hey, there's a haunting over here, do you want to go do that? Then people are suddenly not interested at all. And so it tends to be the dividing line tends to be how far we take it out into the community tends to be a stumbling block. Um, I also found that the other stumbling block, that's probably the greater one, is a really radical misconception of what paranormal investigation is in the witchcraft community, which is interesting because I think we as witches should know more than anyone that media representation is not always the most accurate. Um, so that was something too that we were running into as well.
mm. That's very interesting. I'm just looking at the list of questions I have here because I don't want to like stray too far away because I know like you have so many interesting things to share, and it always happens to me like even when I'm just doing research on myself or by myself or trying to like film a video, suddenly I come up on a like some interesting like correlation with something that I'm doing, and then I I just like go on a tangent.
My
But
friend Z calls that a chupacabra hole. It's not
mm.
even a rabbit hole. It's a chupacabra hole. Just
Oh, what do you mean by that?
do you know what a chupacabra is?
Yeah.
So
I
like there's a saying like going down a rabbit hole like with your research like
oh yeah. Oh,
so my friend Z, she runs
right.
the Ghost and Host podcast with our friend D, and they call it a chupacabra hole. Like when you're doing research, and then you're like, "How did I even end up here in this area?" Like, I fell down this
The truth.
completely other track.
Yeah. No, Chupacabra and the cryptids are another like a whole area. Like I'm wearing a Mothman shirt right now.
Yay! I love that.
Yeah. He's my favorite cryptid.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So I guess you pretty much answered my first question about like, well, actually, not so much because in the opening of your other book, which I didn't read, but I read the foreword because it's available on Amazon. Um, and you've been talking about your struggles of immigrating to the US and kind of like not quite fitting in kind of being in this liminal state where you don't quite fit into either of the cultures. And the reason why I'm so interested in that is because I also had a similar experience where, and I'm gonna mention two of the most controversial countries right now, so I hope I'm not, I hope people are not gonna focus on that, but I was born in Russia. And later on, my family happened to immigrate to Israel because a lot of Russian people were doing it at the time because Russia was actually more dangerous than Israel. And then, at the end, I ended up moving to Canada as soon as I could, because that's like the least, the country with the least conflicts, probably, which is kind of that was what I was trying to get away from.
Mhm.
But I definitely had the similar experience where I wasn't fitting in with the Israeli society, but I was also no longer fitting in with the Russian society quite as much.
Mhm.
And it really is like an interesting state of being that you don't really appreciate unless you're in it. And I think it opens all kinds of doors. So the way I got into spirituality, I was like always interested in ghosts and UFOs and things like that, but the practical side started for me about the age of 13 or 14, where I was basically, I didn't have many close friends, and you know how sometimes children or teenagers have an imaginary friend.
Mhm. Mhm.
What happened is I had an imaginary friend who was based on a character from the D&D Monster Guide, which is not a good place to choose a friend from. Um, and at some point, so I've been like communicating with that imaginary friend in my mind, and at some point, I realized that the communication was becoming actually two-sided. Like I wasn't thinking of the response. The response was coming up by itself. And then other interesting, like I started seeing shadow figures,
Mhm.
and I started discharging electricity in a really weird way. Like one time, like me and my roommates were playing, and something similar to a hide and seek or something like that, or not hide and seek, but some kind of dormitory game.
Mhm.
And he grabbed me, like one of my roommates grabbed me by the shoe, by the sole of my shoe, which is a thick layer of rubber, and he got electrocuted uh, to the point where he jumped back, which was like I know that if you have an electrolyte imbalance or if the air is dry, then sometimes there's static electricity that comes off and and shocks
Mhm.
people. But that was very weird, and at this point, I became a little alarmed. So I went online and looked for, to look for explanations. And I found out about attachments, and I also found out about energy work. And
Mhm.
so I started doing energy work, and it kind of like went away. But then that kind of set me on that journey. And I think this whole thing happened because I was in this kind of, if I fit better into society and, had friends and normal interests, that probably would never happen. And, in retrospect, I am grateful for it happening. So that's kind of like why, this part of your story was also interesting to me, and I would like to hear more about your experience.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, there's so much there. There's so much there. So I would like to start by clarifying that I did not immigrate to the US. I was born and raised here in
Oh,
Oregon.
I'm so
Um,
sorry about that.
no, you're good. You're good. I just want to just be clear for the
Yeah.
record. My family's been in the US for some time now, but we are the descendants of immigrants. And something that's so there's so much in that what you just shared. So if you were in one of my spiritual care services right now, I would really want to unpack why you picked a monster as your imaginary friend at that time, because I think that says so much. Um, but yeah, there's a thing that immigrants share. One of those things is this idea of we don't get to choose some of the things that our parents choose for us.
Hmm.
The fact that you were born in Russia was not something you got to choose. The fact that you were moved over to Israel was not something you got to choose necessarily. That was something you were kind of just along for the ride for.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of immigrant children understand is the sort of like, okay, this wasn't necessarily my choice, but I guess, okay, I'm being moved to an entirely different world. Um, and that can be very difficult because when you are young enough to then assimilate into that new culture, or if you are the children of immigrants who were born in a new place, you're always going to find yourself kind of in this weird no man's land where you're not quite one, but you're also not quite the other. And when you experience this sort of social isolation where you become this sort of island unto yourself, um, a lot of interesting things can happen, particularly spiritually, because I think that the spiritual and particularly the unusual spiritual parts happen in these other spaces or these in-between spaces. And so when we actually end up embodying that liminal crossroad space as a human being, that becomes very spiritually powerful. And I think a lot of people can connect with that idea in different ways. For me, the way that I connected with it was being somebody who is of Mexican descent in the United States, where I grew up with all of my white friends being like, yeah, you're a Mexican, like we don't, get you. Versus like, then I go around and be with Mexicans and they'd be like, you're white, why are you hanging out with us over here? And so it was a very odd place to be. And the more I spoke to other people like me, I was hearing the same stories over and over and over and over again. And so anytime you kind of have that weird otherness, I think magic likes to creep in. I think the spirit world is a little bit closer. I think anytime we find otherness, and I find that a lot of times queer people will also find that as well, which is why they end up kind of being in more of a spiritually loose or kind of witchcrafty area because they're closer to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in arts too, I when I came to Canada, I came as a student and I went to an art school, Sheridan College. It's very famous for animation and illustration, and there was a big LGBT representation
Mm.
at the school, and it yeah, and I don't know so much about spirituality because I haven't really talked to a lot of people about it because people are not like not many people are upfront about it when even if they're you know when you start asking then a lot of times people get like very excited and open right away but unless you ask yeah so I think that makes a lot of sense and like creativity and imagination and like spirituality and witchcraft they seem to be all kind of um very close together and yeah
Yeah, it uses a lot of the same machinery. So,
Yeah.
something that I had to learn early on with my mediumship practice is I would get worried because I'm a writer, and I write fiction as well as nonfiction, and I became very concerned because when I was first learning mediumship, whenever it would be time to receive a response, it would feel like the part of my brain that would come up with dialogue as I was writing.
Mm,
And I was like, I feel like my writer brain is just making it up. And I was talking with a friend and mentor, and they were like, oh no, they're like, they use the machinery that's already there. And that's the machinery that's already in place. And for me, particularly writing fiction is very similar to channeling because a lot of the times as it's coming through, it's just kind of like arriving as you're going, like, okay, and then this happens next, and that happens next. And it's almost something that's passing through us, not necessarily originating from us. And so the mechanisms for creativity and art, but also psychic work and channeling are very closely linked.
mm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I also have some experience writing. I've been ghostwriting for a few clients, and I've written my own stuff, but I haven't published anything yet. But yeah, sometimes an idea would come in a dream as well, and then I wake up and I start writing, and yeah, it's kind of like I'm not like logically thinking like what's the next step for the character to take. I'm like the best writing happens when I'm able to like move into the scene and see like what the characters are doing and what are they saying.
Mhm. Absolutely. And like I kind of got into an argument with somebody online because, what else do you do in 2025? About this idea of whether or not like the writer chooses or if the character chooses. And for me, if I as the writer am making all the choices, then what I'm working with is not alive. If the characters though are unruly and they're making their own choices, and sometimes I'm like, I don't agree with that choice, but you're going there. That's when I know that what I'm working with is alive, and that's how I know that it's good. Is when it kind of takes on its own consciousness in a way.
Yeah, and this is very interesting because I just finished reading the Kybalion. I guess for the audience, it's an kind of an alchemical text of the early 20th century, it's very influential and it's very straightforward and I always appreciate it about like books where they break down things that are extremely useful, but also in a way that's very easy to understand and makes sense. And there is a principle of I forget the name of the principle, but basically the universe is mental. And the entire universe is a mental projection in the mind of the creator.
Mhm.
And there's seven alchemical principles that are explained in the Kybalion. And then another principle is the principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as below, so above. So things on the physical plane have their resonance on the spiritual plane, and that's how we can a lot of the times like there are spiritual levels that are beyond human understanding, but we still can kind of study them because of the principle of correspondence. And the way the authors of the Kybalion explain the correlation between the divine mind and the humans is actually similar to how a writer creates characters. And
Mhm.
the character, if the character becomes self-aware, they would realize they might proclaim something like, "I am the author." But it wouldn't be exactly accurate because you are contained within the author. But also there is something true about it as well because like it's kind of like sunlight is not the sun, but it is a part of the sun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, I run into that a lot, and it's um, this idea of being part of something, still being something, but not being the entirety of something.
Yeah.
Um, it's such an interesting concept, and that's something that we run into occasionally in sort of like the the witchcraft new age movement where people kind of crack that nut open and kind of, but then they stop there at this threshold of, oh, I am God. I mean, they close up the book and then they leave and they're like, I am God. Done. And I'm like, congratulations. But it's not quite that simple. We are a part of God. We might be an expression of God. In some ways, we are God, but that's not the end of the road. I think people want that to be the end of the road, which is why the book closes at that point. But it's something that I've been unraveling and navigating over years, this idea of me and God, and where does one end and the other one begin, or do they end and begin? And if I am one with God, then am I also one with that blade of grass, you
Mhm.
know, or this person I don't like? It's easier to be one with the blade of grass as opposed to I'm watching like Ann Coulter do something terrible on the news, and I'm like, we are one in God somehow, and I hate it. So sometimes it's inconvenient, but that's also part of the struggle and the growth.
It is, yeah. No, I totally understand what you mean. Like it's easy to you know, like when you see like a beautiful sunset, like you know, it's very easy to identify with it and being like, yeah, we're both part of the same God. But when you see someone you disagree with or um something like that, it's a lot harder. Even when you really try, it's a lot harder.
Yes, yes. We can try. I think the point is the trying. I think a lot of it comes down to honest and sincere recognition. I've been doing a lot of reading recently on this idea of like virtue ethics.
Mm,
Um, and a lot of virtue, surprisingly, is based around other people and showing them that we are safe. Um, because at the core, we are all animals clinging to the space rock that's like hurtling through the universe, and everyone is terrified and scared of each other, and we don't know if each other poses a threat. And so, where virtue comes in, like charity and empathy and compassion and trustworthiness and honesty and all those things, are all ways that we are letting each other know that we don't pose a threat to them.
mm,
Uh, and similarly, uh, this idea of like small talk. I used to hate small talk, but small talk is a ritual that tells another person we know how to act and I'm not going to harm you. And
mm.
so, with that understanding, I think it's easier to make more of a space for people that we struggle with, realizing that we are all just trying to live. Doesn't mean we always agree, but it helps me see them in a light that I can work with.
That's very true. Yeah. I think a lot of times if you actually like talk to a person that you perceived all kinds of things about, you'll find that you actually have a lot more in common than you know than the differences that you perceive.
Mhm. For sure.
And I think the conversation about God it actually flows really well into the next question I wanted to ask you, which is so you describe yourself as a folk Catholic?
Yeah. It's
Hmm.
it's weird because I am culturally Catholic, so I was born and raised Catholic. Um I then, of course, like a lot of people who are kind of witchy and gay, we ended up coming away from the church. And, my parents divorced around the same time, and you don't really go back to Catholic church after being divorced. And so I went, of course, to the New Age, Wicca pagan movement of the early 2000s, which a lot of us found ourselves in. Um, and that was incredibly healing for me. Um, but there was still something there in Christianity that I didn't have access to yet at that point. And then it was really reconnecting with my ancestors where I started doing all this ancestor work, and I wanted them to be a part of my spiritual practice and a part of my magic. And so I would do spells and be like, hey, like you guys should join in on this. And they'd be like, we don't know what's going on. They had no idea what I was doing because so much of the magic and witchcraft of like that early 2000s neo-pagan movement was all like this like pseudo-Celtic old religion stuff. My family from the American Southwest and Mexico has no idea what that is. And so that's when I was like, oh, okay. And so that's when I actually began reconnecting with this idea of like Mexican folk magic. And that's when I started working with saints and saint candles and things like that. And then you'd be like, oh, I know what you're doing now. Okay. And then I would get some
Mm.
traction because they would recognize it. And so I really kind of brought full circle back around to Catholicism, um, which was fantastic in helping me reconnect and reorient my magical practice in a way that fit me better. Um, but still, as an adult, queer person who's married to somebody of the same gender, um, you and openly practices and writes books on witchcraft, I still can't attend Catholic Church. That is
Mm.
still not a space that is welcoming to me. And so while I still hold on to the saints and to the Mother of God, Mary, and a lot of those things, I have actually joined a denomination because when you're gay and witchy and kind of Christian, you end up in the UCC, which is the United Church of Christ,
Mm.
which has been a great experience for me. So, me and religion has been a long, windy road.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. And yeah, I hope it's the fact that you can't go to the Catholic Church, I hope it's not causing you too much uh struggle.
I do
Yeah.
occasionally go just because I really do love it. Usually I go when there's
Yeah.
not a mass happening. I like to be there because there's still something there for me, even if the people who attend don't agree. Um, yeah.
For sure, yeah. I had an interesting relationship with religion too, because I was born in a Russian Orthodox family. And then, of course, as we moved to Israel, what happened is, I when I was back in Russia, I was there until the age of 9 or 10, and I've been always wearing a cross. It was a nice one. I don't know what metal it was, but it had a little engraving of Jesus on it, and it was very detailed. I haven't seen it for 23 years, but I still remember exactly what it looked like and what it felt like to the touch. But I was born in Volgograd, which used to be Stalingrad, which is like where the one of the biggest battles of World War II happened, and it's still echoing through the society in Volgograd. Like you can still um, uh, my mom found an anti-tank mine in her garden one time, which was pretty terrifying. It's funny now, but um, there is one building that they left unrepaired on purpose from the bombings to show just how bad the Nazi bombings have been. And it's just basically just like it looks like like a block of cheese. It's just like there's no building, it's just like holes, like a frame with holes in it. And like we've been studying in school about the history of World War II a lot. And one time I asked one of the adults, I asked, You've been telling me that if I wear the cross, Jesus will always protect me. But why didn't Jesus protect like all the Russian soldiers that died in the war? And the interesting thing is, I don't remember the answer at all. I'm drawing a complete blank, but what I remember is I didn't dare ask any more questions after that.
Oh no.
Yeah. And then I was introduced to Judaism, and in Judaism, what impressed me and why I was kind of like in it for so long until early 20s is you were actually allowed to ask questions.
Mhm.
Uh, but later I was very curious and I had a lot of questions. And what I realized over time is that you're allowed to ask questions, but not all of them. And there were certain questions that were off limits, and they were kept off limits to the point there that you didn't even know to ask them. And but because I've been studying spirituality elsewhere and kind of sinning and reading forbidden books, uh, and practicing energy work and things like that, eventually I kind of like uh, expanded beyond what I perceived Judaism to be, and I had a long period of this spiritual crisis where I was still very much curious about spirituality, but I didn't know what if I can trust anything anymore.
Mm.
And I guess I don't want to make this story too long, but eventually the universe guided me back towards a more firm spiritual path. And even in terms of Christianity, I'm not. I know I'm not going to be religious ever again, but opening up to the teachings of Jesus, not the way he was presented to me, but in the way that he presents himself through the Gospels, it's a totally different experience. So I'm definitely like and even I've met multiple Catholic priests, and I've heard some conversations with um, Russian Orthodox and other Orthodox priests, and yeah, they're not bad people the way I used to perceive them at some point. So yeah, it's been definitely kind of like a journey of I'm not gonna say coming back to religion, but definitely coming around to many of the teachings.
Yeah. I've been, something you learn in following witchcraft is one of the oldest spiritual symbols is a spiral.
Hmm.
And I kind of feel that way a lot with my own spiritual and religious journey. It's where I keep coming back to around kind of to the same side, but I'm always in a different place when I come back around to it. And I see it a little bit differently every single time. And then I'll go back around to the other side, but I'll also be in a different place and then just kind of continue to do that. So I've considered myself just walking a spiral for a while now, and especially when you grow up Christian, this idea of changing your belief or experimenting with your belief is always seen as a sign of a weak faith. That, oh well, if your belief can change, then like it wasn't that strong, it wasn't that sturdy, if it can be bent or whatever. Um, but I've come to realize that if I have all the answers and I know exactly what I believe, then well, my faith is dead. It's no longer moving. It's stuck. There's nothing there to work with. There's stuff to repeat. But if my belief is changing and my relationship with God or what I'm referring to as God is changing, then my faith is alive, and
Hmm.
that's come to be more precious and important to me than certainty.
When I was making the decision to leave Judaism for God, for good, I remember that I actually said a little prayer. And it was basically something like, God, I, uh, I really tried for many years to follow your path and understand you, but I feel like I haven't been presented with enough information to be, to do it with integrity. And so, I'm making this choice to expand my path, and I'm doing it in good faith. And if I come back to this path that I'm leaving right now, then I'll gladly do that. And if I'm if I'm sinning, but what I'm doing right now, then please know that I'm still doing it with good intention because I'm still trying to do what is best to the best of my current understanding.
Which is all any of us can do. And it's so funny because so in the Bible, particularly sort of like a lot of the Old Testament stuff, There was this really strong belief that God only resided in one particular geographic location.
Mm.
It was in Israel and nowhere else. And to the point where there was like one king who was foreign who converted. And so he had like a bunch of dirt brought over to like his country so that he could like pray on it because that way God would be there. But then as the Old Testament kind of unfolds and people stray outside of Israel and find themselves in foreign lands, um, they're surprised to be met with God there. And so it's so funny how we will kind of spiritually go into a foreign land and there's God. Maybe not the way we have known them, um, but it's we can still run into the divine in unexpected places, even when we've kind of left our quote unquote homeland and gone into a foreign territory.
For sure, yeah. Especially if you think about it from the perspective of Hermeticism or similar traditions, like everything is happening within the mind of God. So you're never away from God, no matter what you do.
For sure, for sure.
Um, you briefly mentioned that during your first paranormal investigation, your mom dropped you off. And yeah, the next question I wanted to ask, what was your first paranormal experience, if that was that, or was if there was something before that?
Mm. My first paranormal experience. It's hard to pinpoint exactly which one. Because so you'll find that a lot of people who do paranormal investigation all have a very similar origin story. Most of us grew up in a haunted house when we were kids.
Mm,
And so for me, that was definitely a part of it for sure. Um, we lived in rural Eastern Oregon, and our house had a lot of strange things going on to it. It was an old house, um, but for some reason, like in a direct line down the middle of the house, through the kitchen, one bathroom, and what was then my bedroom, all had very low ceilings, all right in a row,
mm,
in like this weird rectangle. And then the rest of the house had higher ceilings out around it. And come to find out later that a great deal of homes in the area where I grew up actually started off as boxcars. They were trains,
mm,
like train cars, that had been decommissioned for one reason or another, and so they just used them as housing frames. And so that's why that one middle section, that rectangle portion, which is specifically that size, once it was mentioned, we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, um, was like that. So there was a lot of history kind of in that area, and we had several ghosts. There was an old woman that my mother used to see. Um, there was also the off the main bedroom, there was a bathroom that was also very odd. It was my parents' bathroom, and sometimes we would use it because it was the only shower in the house. And there was weird sensations being back there, like something had either happened before we had been there, or there was a lot of feelings of kind of being like watched while you were back there. So that was a lot of what piqued my curiosity. Um, and then something that happens to a lot of people like me is every home you then move to is then haunted in a different way.
mm.
And we find that a lot when we're working with paranormal cases where they'll be like, I don't know, like, like this house is super haunted, but like, it's not as haunted as my last one. And we're like, wait, how many houses have been haunted? They're like, well, like all of them. And I'm like, okay, so the problem isn't the house, the problem is you. You are a medium and they're coming out because you are here. So that's part of it. But yeah, no, I grew up in a haunted home.
Mm. That's very interesting. Um, when I was growing up in Russia, I don't know if there was basically like my mom's apartment and my grandma's apartment. I still don't know how we ended up with two apartments. It was too little to understand. But in my mom's apartment, there were some interesting things happening, like the dishes in the kitchen were making sounds during the night, and a couple of times. So in Russia, we have something called the Mavoy, um, which is kind of like a house spirit. And
Oh,
this is another interesting thing, and I think there is a parallel also with like folk religions because in Russia, like people identify as Christian Orthodox, but they retain a lot of the folk beliefs. Like there's the spirit of the house, spirit of the forest, and you have to be on good terms with them.
mhm.
And we had in that apartment, we didn't have an like electric ring bell. It was actually like an actual like metallic bell that would you pull the string and it rings. And I think it even had like some like horseshoe around it and a horse and the bell was inside the horse's mouth. Uh,
Oh, I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, that was like I didn't appreciate how cool it was until, many years later. But there was two times when a fire was about to start at the apartment, and both times this doorbell rang
Mm,
just on time to prevent a serious fire.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes the house spirits are just kind of like, excuse me, excuse me.
So I don't know how haunted it was. I don't know. Like I think it's a very light and benevolent haunting, um, if it even qualifies as one.
Sure, sure. I find
Mm.
most houses are haunted, but very gently haunted. So like
Mm.
people will call me over and be like, there's this disruptive activity, and like you'll walk in and like, yeah, there's like an entity like under the basement that's like causing the problems. But there's also some like dead guy named Joe who's like making a sandwich in the kitchen and he's like definitely not a problem. So like it's I think the spirits are everywhere.
Mm. I uh, I don't want to go on too long about it, but I noticed that, and this is one of the reasons why for a long time I was skeptical about the existence of ghosts, even though I was still excited about the topic. But it was kind of like a personal, almost like a grudge, because I've never. Despite how much I wanted to, I've never seen or felt the presence of something that I perceive to be a disembodied previously human uh, spirit. And I have been experiencing entities quite a lot, and throughout my teenage years, I don't know, it's really weird, but I couldn't sleep in a room with a ticking clock. Because what would happen is I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would hear the clock accelerating and then decelerating multiple times. Uh, and then something would show up. Uh,
Oh.
one time, one of the cases I remember the best is an entity in a red cloak appeared out of it's very hard to because like you're not in a like a a problem solving state of consciousness when things like that happen, and some of the things are very hard to explain, but there was something that was both a sound and an object. It's kind of like like when someone hits a gong, like those giant gongs. It was kind of like that, like this type of sound, but it was also material. And then out of that, like an entity in a red cloak materialized, and I think it was trying to tell me something, but I wasn't having it. And I was also I was also having a sleep paralysis at the same time, so I broke out of the sleep paralysis as fast as I could, and didn't really bother for the message. Um, and there was one time when
Could be in a really receptive place during that.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to avoid anything that's ticking, in the room where I'm sleeping. And there was one time where I was in my bedroom back when with my family's at my family's place, and I started hearing a ticking sound. during the night, and I didn't even know like what like I know there's no clocks, so I started looking for the source of the sound, and it was some kind of a toy because I have a lot of younger siblings. But this particular toy, I think it had batteries in it, but like nobody was using it and it hasn't been working and it ha wasn't on, but somehow it just like randomly started ticking.
Yeah. Oh, almost like you were trying to start it back up again in some way or another. And
Yeah.
that's interesting the way you're talking about sound and like almost like the ticking creating a an opportunity for it to then surge into something else. I my original collegiate degree is in biology, and I found it to be very theological in a lot of ways, but I've also come to understand that biology will never bring us answers as far as the supernatural is concerned. Um, where you will find the answers, though, is in physics.
Hmm.
So this idea of sound, but it's also has a physicality to it. I've been doing a lot of weird stuff with tuning forks lately, and so I can see how that would be a thing, for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, curious, curious.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of things like that, and I had to learn lucid dreaming, not because I was curious about it, but because I've been having these kind of like encounters too many times, and I wanted to kind of have a degree of control over it, which actually helped. But yeah, like I'm not gonna go into all the. This is like not even the most terrifying that one that happened, but you know, I don't want to get into long stories here. So I've been having a lot of this type of encounters where it's like, sleep paralysis. I'm not even quite sure if it was a dream, no matter how realistic it felt, but never any human spirits to the point even where like, sometimes I would be in a place with friends and they would question if it's haunted, and I would just say like, "Don't worry, it's not haunted," because I'm not. I like to think that I would feel something if it were, but I never feel anything, and I don't know if I've ever been around like a spirit of a person.
Perhaps. I think they're often on different sort of vibrational levels. And
Hmm.
so sometimes we're more tapped in at one level versus another level. Um, a lot of mediumship training is about attempting to get ourselves to a place where we can connect with something a little bit higher up. Um, so it may just be kind of like what we're naturally attuned to vibrationally, could be part of it. You never know. The paranormal is a weird, weird place.
Makes sense. Yeah, I guess I'm probably not attuned because I have been to in so here in Toronto we have a place called Casa Loma, and it's actually a castle, but it's not ancient. It was built in the like early 20th century. And it's definitely haunted. Well, not definitely, but according to many witnesses and records, it's haunted. And I've been there twice, but it's a really cool place. I've been having dreams about it, like after, many times after after I've been there, but I haven't really felt anything. So maybe it is just like, the lack of attunement to the specific vibration rather than the ghosts avoiding me for for some reason.
It could be. Well, and a lot of times people are often waiting for something like really big,
Hmm.
like something like really unmistakable, when a lot of psychic sense tends to, at least at the beginning, um, be a lot more subtle than people are expecting.
Hmm.
So a lot of times people actually are having encounters or connections, but they're not recognizing it as it because they're waiting for like the smoke bomb to appear and like something to come out of it and like when it tends to be a lot less than that, at least at the start. So that might be part of it. It's curious though that you're continuing to have dreams about this place, so it did make an impact on you.
Oh yeah, I don't know why, but it had like in my dreams, it wouldn't even look exactly the same every time. It just said it was always like a castle-like building, which in my mind I was calling it Casaloma, but it had a different architecture every time. I just knew that it felt like the whatever feeling I identified with it. And
Mm.
yeah, I the second time I've been there was actually on Halloween this year, so just last week, and yeah, like I felt sad leaving, and I kind of wished I could work there or live there or something.
That would be cool. That would be cool. I've only been to one official castle before.
Mhm.
Um, and even then it was like a mini castle. I'm not sure I would classify it as a castle, but the castle was in the name. So um, I'm so curious about all that goes into it. I think especially like stone castles, because there's something to be said about the geology of a structure in the surrounding area that will contribute to activity of certain kinds. So I don't know. I would like to explore.
Well, if you ever visit Toronto, you know where to go.
Sounds good.
But it is true about like stone structures and like old buildings in general. Because like another thing I really like about historical buildings, whenever I go in, or even like when I'm outside, I like actually like touching the walls and the doorways, and
Mhm.
trying to feel the time and trying to feel whatever the like a lot of buildings here are from 1814 and about that. Time period. And yeah, I'm trying to like feel, the people in the Victorian dresses passing by, like sitting in the chairs, like what were they feeling? What were they talking about?
I think that's an excellent sort of first step into any sort of psychic exploration because that's something that I will often do with the home. I kind of call it greeting the home,
Mm.
um, where I do a lot of sort of touching of particularly doorways and walls. Um, because I need to recalibrate my energy to match its energy so that we kind of are on the same language setting, so to speak. And so if I'm not picking up a lot of stuff from, the home, um, I'll do that and then it'll help me calibrate to it and then I'll start picking up more stuff because sometimes I'll be at a different wavelength that's not, I'm not picking up their signal as much as I should be.
Mm. That makes so much sense. I'll try to do that more consciously next time and more deliberately and see what comes up.
For sure.
I wanted to ask you, I had a friend who is allegedly a medium. I think I have no reason to believe that she's not, but the way my mind works is until I see it, I accept it as a possibility, but I don't believe it.
Mhm.
But she shared a story with me one time that kind of stuck with me, which is she was out in a public one time, and she saw a guy, and beside him she saw the spirit of his brother who was trying to communicate with him. So she approached him and she said, like, "Hey, your brother is here, and he's trying to tell you something. Like, would you like to hear his message?" And the way the guy reacted really surprised me. He said that he got angry with her, and he said that it's against his religion and it's blasphemy. His brother is in heaven, and he basically chased her off. But in doing so, he confirmed that he does have a dead brother. So I'm sure he felt something, and it was just like the possibility was too terrifying and also too hard to accept on the religious level. And this, like, I've been thinking about that a lot, and it got me thinking, like, wouldn't it be more responsible of us as a society? Because, like, we all love our friends and relatives, and we want them to be safe, regardless of like where they are and like what stage of life or afterlife they're at. And like, wouldn't it be better if we had something like almost like a spiritual 911 center where uh, like where a team of psychic mediums would be, where like kind of like projecting a beacon towards where the souls, like because a lot of times the souls, when the body expires and they're confused, they don't know where to go, they don't know what to do. Maybe they didn't even something completely different is happening from what they thought would happen when they die. And then there's also like you did talk in your book about all kinds of other beings that are trying to like harm the souls that are the longer they spend in this liminal state, the higher the risks. So yeah, like I wanted to get your opinion on like what do you think about having more education about the spirit world based on the experience of real life professionals like yourself, and having some kinds of like organizations and more structure, and like if you think that that's something that's beneficial, if it's something that's possible, and why it's not happening.
So there's a few things there. Um, One of the reasons why it's not happening is because we lack a certain level of proof.
Mm,
Um, and that's for a couple of reasons. Whenever we ask for proof of something, we always, of course, turn to science, which makes sense. Um, However, science has certain limitations, two major ones. One of which is it requires instruments and a controlled environment, which we often don't have the technology to measure, weigh certain types of spirits. And also, spirits are not always found in a lab. And so the controlled environment can be very difficult to find.
mm,
Uh, Second of all, is money. Research is very expensive, and research relies on grants. Grants are funded to people who they believe can produce something that's worthwhile and that can make money. So things like pharmaceuticals, treatments for things, all kinds of stuff. So to find funding for paranormal research, it's very limited. Um, and also there's a matter of reputation. Some people might have an enormous scientific reputation, and they may definitely actually believe in the paranormal. But whether or not they would say that or not, or want to, um, you know, uh, suggest doing a research project to go look for Bigfoot or something like that, would cut their chances of funding way down and therefore often be a career ender. So there's a great deal of incentive to avoid the paranormal or anything that could be considered woo-woo when it comes to science. So it's, and something that I learned as someone who was a research scientist is that oftentimes you'll find like a line that says, there is no scientific evidence to support this, does not mean that science has actually looked at it and decided that it is not true. It means science has not looked at it in general. There's a lack of evidence because we have not looked at it, period. Um, and so that's often more of a question mark than an actual denial. The other part of your question about why it's not happening is the question of standardizing um, something like spiritualism or connection with the spirit world becomes very tricky because then the question is, so whose version becomes the standard? Because the way that like Victorian seance would do it versus the way that they would do it, contacting the spirits in the Congo in Africa, or how Teresa Caputo in Long Island would do it are all going to be very different ways. And so when we standardize these things, then of course we have questions of class and representation and supremacy and those who get left out and those who are brought in and who is worth keeping their parts around. It becomes a very, very tricky bag. I think,
Mm,
in order to do that. I would love there to be something like that. And I think really the closest that we're going to get is like the Dionne Warwick Psychic Friends Network, where you can call in for like $2 a minute, talk to a psychic. But I think beyond that, I'm not sure that we'll get it, at least in my lifetime.
mm,
Um, there is, there was, there are some people that will do what they called certifying mediums, where they come at it scientifically to give certain mediums a stamp of approval um, based on certain things. So the Windridge Institute used to do it, but they've closed down. The Forever Family Foundation occasionally will do it. And essentially what they do is it's double blind. So you do a phone conversation with somebody. It's not even a conversation, but you get a call from somebody um, who you don't know, and they don't say anything on the phone, but you do a reading for another person who
mm,
is not that person on the phone. And the person who's listening just simply records everything that you say and then presents it to the person who the reading was for, and then they can mark the accuracy of it. Um, so there's some ways that they're coming up with to test psychics, but the actual spirit part, not so much.
mm. That must be a really difficult test because, like, sometimes it's very hard to isolate the exact spirit you want to talk to. I have seen some not seances, but basically like spirit communications where there's multiple people in the room, and the medium is trying to read one person, but then someone else's very eager relative comes in and
That does happen. There's actually a term for it. We refer to it as piggybacking.
Hmm,
Uh, and then, of course, there's always the question of what counts as accuracy. So there was a game show for a while, and I loved it. It was so cool. It was called America's Psychic Challenge. I
hmm,
think it only happened like 2 seasons, maybe three. But what they would do is they would take all these psychics and then they would put them to the test through various challenges. So like one of the challenges would be like they would take them to a parking lot full of cars, and then they would say, there is a person stuck in the trunk of one of these 100 cars.
hmm,
Your job is to find them. And the way it was scored was based on like they get like 5 points if they got like the car itself, but only like 4 points if it was like a car away and then like so far out. So if you weren't within like two, three cars, you wouldn't get any points. But a lot of these psychics, even though they wouldn't get the car right, would get things like the person is wearing a green shirt. Um, they have been in there for 20 minutes. Um, they like all kinds of stuff that wasn't necessarily the specific car, but it would still be related and accurate information, but not what they were looking for. Um, which was what made the scoring of it very difficult. Because while they would be correct, they did not fulfill like a certain prompt. There was another one where they took them to a prison and had like four prison cells, each with prisoners in them, and three of them were not criminals, and one of them was a convicted criminal, and they had to choose which one was the convicted criminal. And what was really interesting is most of them picked like the guy who was in like cell number two, who had no criminal record, but all of them were like, he's done something. Meanwhile, the guy who was the criminal was like, oh yeah, I've been saved by Jesus. I no longer have sin or guilt or anything like that. Like I've been washed clean. Like I'm no longer carrying any of that stuff. Um, and so they weren't picking up on him so much because he was an entirely different person who had changed his life around. Meanwhile, this guy, because he didn't have a record, doesn't mean he didn't do anything.
hmm.
So I always wondered about that guy. I'm like, they were all picking up on something. Um, so yeah, it brings in this idea of accuracy. What counts as accuracy?
That's so interesting. I feel like this is a like a clash between people call it a left brain and right brain. I know it's not exactly neurologically accurate, but th this is kind of like the classification.
Yeah.
And yeah, like as we talked in the beginning about the art and spirituality, they're all kind of like using the same circuitry. And
Mhm.
then but like when you're trying to measure something scientifically, you use like it's a different process, and it's very hard to align those two.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I'm not sure again that we'll see it in my lifetime. I do hope, however, that they will bring back America's Psychic Challenge in my lifetime.
That
Because
would be.
there,
We did have something like that in Russia too. I'm sure it was a ripoff of that, but the name of the show was called the Battle of the Psychics, which is
there is
more intense. And
um,
I haven't seen the show, but I've only seen the bloopers that show how, like all the instances where it seems like the psychics are fraudulent. Uh,
that does happen. That does happen. Like,
yeah.
and that's the other thing too, like talking about the ideas of what counts as accurate. Um, also plays a part in who is a fraud and who isn't. So, like for instance, I find that a lot of times people don't understand how mediumship works, and therefore they think that if any time a medium is off or whatever, that's makes them a fraud, or things like, well, um, like if they're really a psychic, then why didn't they get XYZ or whatever? Meanwhile, your medium is running through this list of like symbols that they're trying to interpret all the way through.
Yeah.
Um, and so the question of accuracy, or like when people be like, well, like why does Teresa Caputo say like, like who is the mother figure that's stepping forward for you? Like, yes, that's very broad, but also she may not have a symbol for Mary Sue Johnson is your grandma's name, like, but she does have a symbol for mother, and a symbol for, so the language is different. It's a translation game too.
Yeah. From what I understood, there's like three types of people in this field, and which is like the real psychic mediums or psychics, and then there are people who are really like they're empathetic and they're good at cold reading without even knowing it, and so they honestly believe that they are psychic, and I'm sure they do help a lot of people, but they kind of like they're not exactly fraudulent because they don't mean to deceive anyone. And then there are like actual con artists as well who just they probably did the research and they know what things to say and how to act to appear real. And I guess that's another difficulty in the research because like how do you tell which one is which? Because the con artists tend to be very good at their job, and
Mhm.
the innocent cold readers they are like passionate and truthful people. So again, how do you parse that out? And then I don't know if anyone even knows what are the percentages in terms of how many of each category we even have.
Yeah, because you would have to research it. Well, and one of the issues too that we run into, particularly in the paranormal or when it comes to psychic phenomenon, is the idea of possibility and versus reality. So, for instance, Penn and Teller for a really long time have been very adamant that there is no such thing as psychics or mediums. All of them are con artists across the board because they know ways to fake it. And so, because there are ways to fake it, that means it's all fake, which is always an interesting leap for me. And I think another reason why we'll never actually see standardization or um, that's why I'm honestly against sort of, I wouldn't say against. I stay away from paranormal investigation that is specifically looking for evidence
Mhm.
because I find it to be a waste of time. Because if even if you do get that evidence, there is a way to fake it. And therefore, and that's the only hurdle that quote unquote debunkers have to cross is there a way to fake it? Well, of course. You saw the last Avengers movie, they faked New York getting eaten by aliens. Like there is always a way to fake it. And so even if you do get the evidence, it won't be accepted. And so I focus my paranormal career elsewhere, um, because that's such a very low hurdle for them to completely disregard everything that you've done and go, oh, well, it could have been faked.
Yeah, for sure. This is something I also feel like when I watch paranormal investigation videos on YouTube.
Hmm.
Like it's always very exciting to learn about the history of a place they're visiting, and the editing is getting better and better, and very dramatic. Um, and I always like watching like whenever they do the Estes method.
Mhm.
That's my favorite part of the paranormal videos. But yeah, it's like you said, I never know how much of it might be staged, either by the owners of the haunted house or by the investigators. Um, like if I owned a property that had a reputation of being haunted, what's stopping me from, installing some like speakers and some like EMF emitters in strategic spots and, inviting the investigators in?
You totally should. I think that would be cool if you had that possibility. Though, I mean, there's something too about the paranormal that um, they tried to put a bunch of cameras and stuff around a place known as Skinwalker Ranch,
Mm.
that's known as being like a really hot spot. And they had all kinds of issues with their cameras and stuff like that. So, I mean, the paranormal is kind of paranormal, which is another part of what makes it difficult to sort of really get a grasp on and kind of mainstream it in a lot of ways. Um, Similarly, the other idea is humans, particularly those who are kind of scientific minded, have a deep need for what we refer to as cognitive closure, which is sort of this idea of being able to solve the riddle. And so the paranormal, when it's real, poses an open-ended question that, okay, well, we can't just tie a bow on this and go, oh, like Scooby-Doo, pull the mask off and go, it was old man Benson, ta-da, and then move on. And especially people who are scientifically minded, that is very bothering to them. And so what a lot of times will happen is you'll have these very famous paranormal cases. And if you bring up something like, oh, like the Enfield haunting, the Enfield poltergeist, which the second Conjuring movie revolves around, you bring that up, someone is always going to go, oh, well, yeah, didn't they say that was a hoax? And like, does it make you feel better if it's a hoax? And then usually it's like, yes, it is. It does. When you actually look at the evidence for it being a hoax, actually really pales in comparison to some of the other evidence. So it kind of depends on what you're willing to leave open-ended when it comes to the paranormal. And a lot of times people are not good at that, so they won't.
It's really interesting because like one of the recent Sam and Colby videos were in a house that's featured in the new Conjuring movie, which is basically like it's not the Conjuring house, it's a different place. And there was a family living there, and they actually did an Estes method. And of course, I'm taking it with a grain of salt, but something interesting happened where they were asking the spirits about the family that was living there, and the spirits basically told them that it was like, there were real events, but half of what the family told is not true. So half is true and half is not.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I would be so curious about that because I mean that definitely does happen for sure. Um, the other thing though is like a lot of times when that stuff happens, well, I'm not saying like a lot of times, but there are instances where spirits will lie.
Hmm.
And I've come across that too in my mediumship, where usually though it's a way of them communicating their personality, is they'll mess with me because I think it's hilarious. So I'll be like, oh, well, he said he was like a potato farmer or whatever. And then like they're like, what are you talking about? And the spirit starts cracking up because they think it's hilarious. Um, so I mean it all depends. It all depends. Spirits are just like people in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's another thing that makes it really complicated. Well, yeah, so I guess this was a really great conversation, and thank you so much for sharing your time and wisdom. One last thing I wanted to ask is, what are you currently working on? If you have any new books coming out or any exciting projects?
I have two books that I've kind of just been sitting on for a while now. I keep telling myself I'm going to finish them, and then I do terrible things like start grad school. So um, we'll see. I would like to get them out soon. Right now, I'm working on a lot of my fiction work and also doing a lot of kind of more community-oriented spiritual care work in my local area, which has been really nice. So I haven't been doing too much sort of computer-based work for a while, but
Hmm.
I do feel it will eventually come back around. So,
Well, I'll be looking forward to that. And yeah, like if people want to find out more about you and about your work, where should they look?
you can find my books pretty much wherever books are sold, and you can find me mostly on Instagram. My handle is at Oregon Woodwitch with underscores between. Make sure that you look at it fairly hard. A lot of times people like to pretend to be me on Instagram, and it's very weird. If I send you a message and I'm like, I would like to give you a reading because you're very special, run away. That is not me. Um, but yes, that's the best way to find me is on Instagram.
I've had those happen to me, and I'll put the link down below because that's also how I found you. So I can
Perfect.
confirm that the one I found is real.
Perfect. Yes, check that.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jay, and I wish you the best of luck with your project and ongoing projects, and I hope you fully recover soon.
Thank you. I
And
will not be all stuffy forever, I hope.
oh yeah, for sure. Okay. Bye.